Hello everyone, Happy New Year. My name is David Webb, and today we're going to be talking about how to write a book. I'm sure a lot of you have made resolutions to let 2020 be the year that you finally write your book, and I want to help you do just that. So today I'm going to give you a high-level overview into what goes in the back end of making your book, going from the very beginning of your idea to sitting down and writing it. Each of the aspects that I'm going to talk about today, I promise I'll go into more detail in a later video, but right now at the beginning of the new year, I want to start it off and give you a high-level overview of how to write a book. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be publishing videos that take everything I'm about to say and go into a whole lot more detail. So be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay notified. This video is going to specifically be tailored to fiction writers, but I promise I'll talk about nonfiction at a later date. Even if you've written books before, watch this video. There's one thing that I want to talk about toward the end of the video that I believe to be one of the most important parts of your story. So here we go. Jumping into it, first I want to go into genre. Your genre is going to be one of the most important things that you define right off the bat. Now, it needs to be a genre that you read a lot and that you actually enjoy. If you don't read a genre that you're writing in, it's going to show in your writing. And if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to always enjoy writing your book, and that's going to show as well. For example, if you read a lot of mystery books, but you want to write fantasy, something's going to feel off when people are reading your book. They may not necessarily be able to explain what's wrong, but something will be wrong and they'll feel it and they'll know it. This is also going to partially dictate what takes place in your story because of genre expectations. There are certain things that readers are expecting when they read a certain genre. If you're reading a mystery book, the reader expects the killer to be caught at the end. If you're reading a fantasy book, readers will typically expect a certain level of magic. For those of you daring enough to write romance books, readers expect the two main characters to end up together in the end. I can't stress enough how important this is, even though it sounds kind of formulaic. It's almost as if you've got to follow these predefined notions of what a genre is. And in some cases you do. You can write the most twisty story that defies genres, but if a reader picks up your book and expects something very specific, and they don't get it, you run the risk of alienating them. I'm not saying you have to follow every specific trope and cliche, but they're there for a reason. Once you're a well-established writer with a lot of books under your belt, you can get away with breaking more and more genre rules. But especially as starting out as a first-time writer, there are certain genre expectations you more or less need to follow. Next, we'll talk about character. It's crucially important that you have an interesting and engaging character. It's been said that great books are about complicated characters, but simple stories. You can have the most twisty story in the world, but if you don't have interesting characters, you're gonna have a hard time connecting with the reader. I like to think of the main character as a proxy to the person reading the book. If you want the reader to be surprised at something, for example, you need to have the main character be 10 times as surprised. At the end of the day, the person reading your book knows that they're reading a book. You can only suspend disbelief so much. I'm not saying you need to be melodramatic, but whatever emotion you want the reader to feel, you better make sure your main character is feeling it, and then some. Your characters need to be complicated. They need to have many layers to them. Why? Human beings are complicated, and if you make your characters anything less than complicated, people will see right through it. You can have simple one-dimensional characters, but that's one of the things that people pick up on the most, even though they don't read a lot. This is because people encounter other people on a daily basis their entire lives. They know how people act, think, and talk. As soon as you have them act one specific way the whole book, your readers will see right through it. This is a very complicated subject, and I promise I'll go into it in more detail, but for now, I'll recommend the book The Art of Character by David Corbett. This is a great resource to help you get started writing very complicated but powerful characters. Next, we're going to talk about your story. I'm going to put story in its very simplest terms. Your story needs to come from a premise that is easily explainable in one sentence. This is going to make sure that your story is simple enough and clear enough to explain to one person in as few words as possible. If you can't tell somebody what your book is about in 10 seconds, you're doing it wrong. A very popular formula for doing this is when something happens to someone, they must do this to do that or get that. In this one sentence, you need to summarize who your main character is, what he's fighting for, who he's fighting against, and what he's going to get if he succeeds or fails. For example, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is commonly summed up like this. A boy wizard begins training and must battle for his life against the Dark Lord that murdered his parents. In the case of the Harry Potter example, it's obvious that the story is about a boy wizard. The antagonist is the Dark Lord, aka Voldemort. He must train so that he develops his skills, and the end result being he battles the Dark Lord, with the direct implication that if he loses, he dies. It's also very important that in this one sentence, you identify what makes your story unique. What makes the story unique is the fact that this is a boy wizard, he's a child. From that one simple sentence, you can expand it a little bit more and even turn it into an outline. but you have to start with one sentence that clearly defines what your story is. One quick note on this: don't chase trends. A lot of authors do this. They'll see one book that becomes really popular, and they'll write a very similar book hoping to chase the popularity of this other book. But all too often, these trends don't last very long, and by the time the popularity of this first book dies away, the second book becomes irrelevant. In my opinion, there's just no point in chasing trends. You never know what's going to be popular any particular day. There are some people who have been able to somewhat successfully predict trends, but following them is almost as useless as following the trend itself. Write what you know, aka if you read a lot of it, write what you love, and write a darn good story. What I'm calling the fourth pillar is your theme. So many people overlook this. Everyone undervalues it, but I can't stress enough how important it is. This is what turns your book from a collection of words into a story with meaning. Along with your characters, this is even more important than your story. At the end of the day, you need to have your reader sit back and realize that this story means something a little bit more than what the end result of the plot was. This is what gives your stories life. Once you know what your theme is, you need to be able to take that and insert it into every single scene of your novel. I'm not saying beat the reader over the head with it, but every scene needs to serve this theme in one way or another, sometimes incredibly subtle. It helps you identify what scenes in your book may not be necessary. If every scene and every chapter serves to build this theme, it's going to become a cohesive symphony that your readers won't even realize until the story is over. Next up, you could consider your setting. Your setting, of course, being defined by where your story takes place and when it takes place, among other things. If your genre is science fiction, your setting could be anything from a spaceship to an alien planet to 20 miles beneath the earth. I've had people say that they were sold on my book as soon as they realized that it took place so far underground, way off in the distant future. It's an interesting setting, and oftentimes that's enough to get people interested. Next, we're going to talk about how you actually write the book. There are, of course, plotters and pantsers. There's no one true way to write your book. It depends on the person, but I will say to those pantsers out there, consider plotting your book. Maybe not fully outlining it, but even the tiniest bit of structure will help you to focus your book. If you give your story just the littlest bit of structure, it'll majorly cut down on the time you spend editing your book. To sum up really, plotting is easier to edit, but pantsing is arguably more fun. The final step to preparing your book is to just write it. Write every single day. This will train your mind more and more, and it'll be easier with each passing day to just write your book. And while you're writing, resist the urge to edit. Trying to edit yourself while you're writing is only going to slow your writing down. Just get your words out and then maybe edit the next day. Or better yet, just write the entire book and then go back and edit it. And that's it. That's all you need to know to start your book. In the coming weeks, I'll go into more detail on every single thing that I mentioned in this video. So be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and ring the bell to stay notified. Now, in my last video, I promised you a surprise at the end of this video that you would get to see before the rest of the world. That surprise was going to be this, the cover reveal for my second book. But when I sat down to film my video, it was storming really bad, and I like natural lighting to film my videos. So as a result, I couldn't film for 2 days, and I had already scheduled my cover release on social media. So I'm going to give you another surprise to sort of make up for it and to remain a man of my word. And that's going to be in the form of a giveaway. Leave a comment down below to be entered to win a free signed copy of my first book, The Light Thief. I realize now that this was probably a better surprise to do in the first place, but hey, now you get both. And that's it. Thank you again for joining me. Be sure to come back next time for more writing tips so you can write that book.